My name is Eli Wren, and I have been asked many questions in my 11 years in deep space operations. Most of them were technical. Some of them were practical. A few of them were the kind that stay with you long after the conversation is over, not because they were difficult to answer, but because the asking of them told you something important about the person who asked. The question Commander Sal Vorn asked me on a Tuesday evening in the observation deck of Station Kareth 9 was that last kind. She had been building toward it for 3 months. I had noticed. You spend enough time paying attention to things, and you start to see when someone is circling something they have not yet decided how to approach directly. She would start a conversation and take it almost to the edge of the question, and then pull it back and go somewhere else, and I had been waiting for the day she stopped pulling back. That day was a Tuesday evening in the observation deck with the outer belt moving past in the viewport and 2 cups of something warm between us that we had developed the habit of sharing after long shifts. She looked at the viewport for a while and then she asked it. She said she had been studying humans for 20 years. She said she had read everything available, every xenobiology report, every contact history, every psychological assessment, every performance evaluation from every joint operation on record. She said she had worked alongside 3 human crew members before me and had observed carefully and documented thoroughly. She said there was one thing she still did not understand. She said humans do not stop. Not as a compliment, not as a criticism, just as an observation delivered with the precise and genuine puzzlement of someone who had been trying to categorize a thing for 20 years and had not been able to fit it into any existing category. Every other species she had studied, she said, had a threshold, a point where the calculation changed and survival became the priority and the original objective was released. It was not weakness, it was rational. The calculation was correct. Most things were not worth dying for, and a living member of a species contributed more to that species than a dead one. Humans, she said, did not appear to have that threshold, or if they had it, it was in a place that did not correspond to any calculation she had been able to model. She looked at me. She asked why. I sat with the question for a moment, not because I did not know the answer, but because the answer deserved to be said properly. I told her about fear first, because the question underneath her question was really about fear, about why we kept going when the rational response was to stop, and the answer started there. I told her that humans were afraid of most things, that we were not brave in the sense of being without fear. We were afraid of death and pain and failure and loss and 100 smaller things that most species would find unremarkable. We were not fearless, we were something different. She asked what? I told her we were afraid of the wrong things more than we were afraid of the wrong things. She looked at me. I told her that what humans feared above almost everything else was not death, it was meaninglessness. The idea that we had been here and done nothing with it, that the people we cared about had needed something from us and we had not provided it, that there had been something worth doing, we had turned away from it because it was hard. That fear, I told her, was bigger than the fear of dying, and when it was bigger than the fear of dying, and when it was bigger than the fear of dying, it changed the calculation completely because the calculation was no longer about surviving. It was about what surviving was worth. She was quiet for a long time. I kept going because the question deserved the full answer. I told her about human history, not the wars and the failures. She had read about those, but the pattern underneath them. The pattern of people who should have stopped and did not, who had every rational reason to put something down and carried it instead. Who had calculated the cost and paid it anyway because the thing on the other side of the cost was worth it. I told her that was not unique to heroes or soldiers or people who were exceptional. It was ordinary. It was the baseline. It was a mother staying awake for the 4th night running because her child needed her to. It was a person going back into a burning building because someone was still inside. It was a crew member in a maintenance corridor making 3 adjustments with a multi-tool because 400 people needed those adjustments to be made. It was the thing that looked like courage from the outside but felt from the inside like the only available option because the alternative was unacceptable. She was looking at me very carefully. I told her the last part. I told her that humans had been afraid and exhausted and broken and wrong for all of recorded history, and we had kept going anyway, not because we were strong, but because we had decided, collectively and individually and over again in every generation, that the things worth caring about were worth the cost of caring about them. And that decision, made enough times by enough people, became a reflex. It stopped being a choice and started being a character. It stopped being something you did and started being something you were. That was why we did not stop. Not because we were not afraid, not because we did not feel the weight, But because the weight of stopping was heavier than the weight of going, and we had been making that calculation long enough that we made it without thinking. The observation deck was very quiet. The outer belt moved past in the viewport, slow and indifferent and completely unchanged by anything we had said. Commander Sailvorn looked at her cup and then out at the belt, and then back at me, with eyes that were doing the careful and thorough work she always brought to things that mattered to her. She said she had read 20 years of assessments on human psychology, and none of them had described what I had just described. I said they were probably measuring the wrong things. She almost smiled, which was the same thing she almost did every time I said that, and which I had come to understand was her version of acknowledging something she found genuinely true. She said the reports describe human persistence as a behavioral trait linked to specific neurological characteristics. I said that was accurate as far as it went. She said none of them described it as a choice. I said that was the part they missed. She was quiet again for a moment. Then she said something that I had not expected and that I thought about for a long time afterward. She said she had been afraid once of a very specific thing. Not death. She said she had made peace with that early in her career, as most command officers did. She had been afraid of making a decision that cost someone their life who had trusted her not to make that decision. She said she had been carrying that fear for 9 years, since a mission in the early part of her command career that she did not describe in detail but that I understood from the shape of what she said around it. She said she had managed it by being more careful, more precise, more thorough, by reducing the variables that could lead to that outcome to the smallest possible number. She said what I had just described made her think about that differently. She said she had been afraid of the wrong thing. She said the thing worth being afraid of was not making the decision that cost someone their life. It was failing to make the decision that could have saved it. I did not say anything because she had arrived at that herself and it was hers. She looked out at the belt for a while. Then she said thank you. I said for what? She said for answering the question properly. I said it was a good question. She said she had been building toward it for 3 months. I said I knew. She looked at me. I said I had been waiting for it. She said, why did you not ask it yourself? I said because it was your question, and it needed to come from you. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up her cup and looked at the belt, and the conversation moved on to other things, the way conversations do when the important part has been said, and what comes next is the easier part that follows it. But the question stayed with me, the way the good ones do. Not because it had been hard to answer, because the asking of it had told me something important about the person who asked. She had been studying humans for 20 years trying to understand us, and what she had really been doing underneath the studying and the reports and the careful observation was trying to understand herself. That was the thing about good questions. They were never just about the person you asked them to. They were always, at least a little, about you.